Hi everyone, welcome to Google Season of Docs 2023. This is a webinar hosted by Document Right in partnership with Google for the Google Season of Docs. And welcome, yeah. So Google Season of Docs is an annual program organized by Google that pairs technical writers with open source organizations to work on documentation related projects. The program is designed to improve documentation for various open source projects, making it more accessible and easier to understand for users and developers. During the program, technical writers will work with participating organizations to contribute to documentation related projects, and this may include creating new documentation, updating existing documentation, creating tutorials, and much more. Participants are provided with support, resources, and guidance on their success in the program. And one of those resources is this webinar, where we're going to be talking about how to hire a technical writer. Next slide, please. All right, that's our topic right there. And thank you very much again to Google for inviting us here. So, what we're going to cover, next, please. We're going to cover where you can find the right candidates, the project skills that will be required, and also some tips on working remotely. We're also going to discuss setting realistic timeframes once you have a technical writer on board. Um, the big elephant in the room nowadays when it comes to writing, large language models like Bard and ChatGPT, how to handle that in your workflow, um, and also writing a great job description and managing applications. Then we'll wrap up and we'll have a Q&A section. So throughout the webinar, feel free to type in your questions in the chat box, and at the end, we'll have some time where we can answer those questions that you have. Next slide, please. So before we begin, a little introduction. My name is Charles. I am a technical writer at Document Right. My background is in software development, particularly mobile applications and web programming with Angular. I also create content on YouTube on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/codeswag, where I make tutorials on Ionic, mobile apps, Angular, etc. And I'm coming to you from the beautiful Surf Coast in Australia. Portia, over to you.
Hey, thank you so much, Charles. If you've watched any of our Document Right videos, it is Charles that masterminds them. He puts them together, he's the voice of them. So thank you, Charles. Now you can actually see the face behind the videos. So,
Yeah.
my name is Portia. I am the founder of Document Right. Previously, I worked as a software developer at places like the Atlantic Magazine and Protocol Labs. So I've done stuff. So I've worked with Django, I've worked with JavaScript, and I've worked and loved jQuery. I think I've already made some enemies, so let me just keep it moving. Before I worked as a software developer, I was actually an ESL teacher at Disney English in Beijing many, many, many years ago. So I also have an educational background. And I am based in Raleigh, North Carolina. I just moved here less than a year ago. It's not so cool with lots of surfing. So the best emoji I could come up with like is a piece of meat because of the barbecue that you can find here. But there's vegetarian barbecue as well. It's not as cool as surfing. So a little bit about Document Right. Document Right is a technical writing agency. We have specialists who write, audit, and revamp technical documentation. All of our writers are also software developers, so that we're able to add empathy to the job that we're doing. And our technical content solves problems. It solves how do you onboard your users? How do you stop information silos? How do you make sure that different departments work with each other? And internal data flows. How do you make sure that your knowledge is not tribal or your knowledge is not in one person's head? In software development, we talk about the three engineer bus problem. What happens when you have three engineers in a bus and something happens to the bus? The knowledge gets lost. If you have great documentation, then you're able to, that information lives on, and it gives you more chance to take that information, use it, and make sure that it's not with one person. The bus analogy is a bit morbid, but just let's say someone leaves, it's really good to make sure that they're not taking all that information with them. We turn good documentation into great, and we want to make sure that it's critical. We've worked with companies like Honeycomb, Neon, and DigitalOcean. Give me one moment. I want to make sure that my sound is working. All right, let's continue. So the question is, so we've worked with Honeycomb, Neon, Bloom Credit, and DigitalOcean. And you might be wondering, well, why now? When I was working as a software developer, I've noticed tons of informational silos. I've noticed that you had product managers, you had technical writers, and it was in the company's best interest to get that information out. But to be quite frank with you, very few people were going to get a promotion based on sitting down and writing the documentation. So, we're going to talk about how to hire a technical writer. Hiring a technical writer is the first step in improving your organization's documentation. You want to make sure that you're finding the person who will complement your team's writing goals. And this presentation is basically, it's matchmaking, just nerdy matchmaking. It's a way that you can find someone's skills and you can match them with your problems. So let us continue. The first section of this presentation, we're going to go over where to find the right candidates. And the two places that we always tell people is, first, you should look within your community. And second, you should look at special Slack communities for technical writers. So let's go over the first one. We've seen the most success at Document Right and also Google Season of Docs when companies were looked for people within their orgs. So if you have an intern, if you have a software developer who has been contributing technical writing in the past, then those are the people that you should talk to first. If you are dealing with another org that knows your mission, that knows your code, that knows what you've been writing about, then those people are also ideal candidates to check out. Search for someone who believes in your mission. It's really important that they know, of course, your tech stack, but it's more important that they believe in what you're trying to accomplish. We've had personal experience where you can teach skills, but it's harder to teach that passion. It's harder to teach that alignment. And we know that it's really tempting to hire that person that just checks off all the boxes when it comes to skills. But if they're not interested or if the mission is not aligned, then we suggest going to a person that might not have all those boxes checked, but they completely believe in the future that your organization is trying to create. So the next good place to look for technical writing talent are Slack channels. So going to places like Write the Docs, they're an amazing channel. And the Society for Technical Communication, they're also a good place. What I will say is if you are advertising there, you are probably going to get a lot of applications. project skills and remote work. So we're going to talk about skills and project goals. The reason why we're going over this is because we've seen time and time again that we can tell you about clarity and project goals, but one thing that we really want you to take away from this presentation is not only the information but fueling it with the action. So I just want to put that out there before we continue. Skills, project goals for informing search. Make sure you're clear about what do you want to accomplish. Like, what do you want to do you want to do a content audit? Are you not sure exactly what kind of documentation lives in your knowledge center? Do you want to do informational architecture? Do you have end users who just do not know how to look and efficiently find the information? It's really important for you to be very clear about what your goals are. Are you trying to raise awareness? Do you want more people to know about you? Document Right, last year, we hired a college intern, and she did not have experience in technical writing. She didn't have experience in coding, but she was very good with social media. She was very good with Twitter. So we were able to teach her how to use Git, teach her about GitHub. We actually taught her about Markdown and React, and she was phenomenal. She believed in our mission, and it was really easy to train her up. So once again, look for that person who believes in the mission, and also look at it as an exchange of skills. Like, we had the skills of like Markdown, I mean React, but she had the social media skills. Finding a relationship where both parties benefit is what you're looking for when you're looking for candidates. And so this part, we're going to pass it over to Charles, and he'll talk more about working remote. Take it away, Charles.
All right, thank you. So when working remotely, it's really important to take into account time zones. Um, and it's quite the challenge. If say your team is located like in Alberta time zone, it would be really difficult for you to host regular meetings with some of your team members if they're spread across the world. Like, for example, if they're in Australia. Um, this is something that I have quite a bit of personal experience in. It is quite tough to organize those meetings. Right now, this webinar is happening at 5:13 a.m. Melbourne time. So
Charles,
it's
wow, you're
really
making this real personal.
just an example. Yeah. So yeah, when you're dealing with such drastic time differences, it's important for you to employ certain strategies that'll help you manage that situation. So, for example, you might be familiar with the stand up meeting from Agile Processes. This is a meeting where you and your team for 15 minutes just update each other. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And what are any blockers that you're facing? And the team can help each other to resolve some of those blockers. So, when you're working in a distributed setup, um, it's really useful to use what's known as an asynchronous stand up. So rather than having a meeting where everyone is there at the same time, you can catch up and update each other asynchronously using tools such as Slack or Discord. Um, so literally what that means is maybe you have a particular channel where you'll go in and you'll say, this is what I did yesterday, etc., etc. And the next team member can make their contribution um, during their waking hours. You can also make use of tools like Loom. So not only can you do it via text, but you can also use Loom. Next slide, please. And Loom is a short video platform that allows you to make a quick screen recording of your computer, of your desktop. And it's really useful in instances where you're trying to convey complex ideas. For example, Perhaps there's a particular bug you're having with your documentation platform, um, or you want to make a bug report, for instance. It's really useful in having that visual explanation. And also, sometimes it's much easier to express certain ideas when you just talk about them on the fly. If you work a lot with GitHub, it's really useful as well, making a accompanying video to your pull request, for instance. Um, and as well, with tools like Slack and Discord, they have a huddle feature where you can quickly jump into a meeting, video or audio, whichever you prefer, and hash out a particular issue that your team is facing. I particularly like on Slack, there's this great feature where you have a highlighter. So it's really easy when you're guiding someone, perhaps uh, you've hired your technical writer and you're walking them through some of the platforms you use. You can easily highlight on the screen, click here, click there, etc. And it's really, really useful. So these are some strategies that you can use to manage the remote working setup. Not to discourage you from doing it. It does have its downsides, but it has some really great upsides as well. Um, Talent is uniformly distributed around the world, and if your organization can employ strategies to take advantage of that, you will have access to a global pool of talent, and that can be a real competitive advantage for your organization. Over to you, Portia.
Thank you. And the past 6 years have definitely been the golden era of remote tools. I've been working remote on and off since 2014, and being able, I think we use something called Screen Hero, and that blew our minds. But being able to use tools like Loom, like having a short video, like we use Loom almost daily at Document Right, using FigJam as a whiteboard. It's a great way to kind of have that face-to-face communication. We use Discord to call folks when we have a question, and it's just it's just a better environment, and there's just tools to make that remote experience rich for you and for the technical writer that you've hired. Be realistic about timeframes. I know it's very easy, especially in the beginning of a project, because I've done it myself, to get overly ambitious about when you're going to finish projects. When you're creating timeframes, keep in mind the person that you're hiring and the amount of time it'll take them to onboard on the domain knowledge or on board on like the technical parts, such as maybe like the JavaScript or the markdown. So be realistic. It's also about skill level as well. So if you're hiring someone more junior, once again, be generous in terms of padding the times needed to onboard that person. And also be very intentional about your schedule. From the past Google season of Docs, some of the orgs that participated, they mentioned that they did not know how much time they had to spend mentoring. They did not know how much time it would take for them to onboard. It took more time than usual. So it's really good to be liberal when it comes to the time that you would need to mentor and your and time frame. Also, when you're dealing with someone, especially junior, make those big tasks and break them into small chunks. It is a clearer way for you to figure out what needs to be done, what's not. When you break it down into chunks, you figure out, oh, I've forgotten about this middle step. It's a great way for the technical writer to look at it and be really clear about what it takes to finish that big overarching goal. So here's an example of a time frame from a past Google season of Docs participant. So they have a task to the left and they have the right tape, the right column, which is completed by. I really like this example because it shows you that you don't need to go overboard with tooling. Like you don't need to go into Jira. You don't need to be a scrum master in order to take the technical writer and take the project and be able to manage it well. Writing assessment. So in this section, we're going to talk about how do you analyze, how do you look at a candidate's application? And we'll have a word about large language models such as Bard and ChatGPT. So, in terms of writing assessment, what we've personally found and past cohorts of Google Season of Docs have found is that it's really good to have that person work on your documentation now or work on an assignment that's very similar to what they'll be working on during that time period. So, if you need a content audit, having them go in and do like a mini audit, or if you are having problems with site navigation, having someone go into your documentation and pick out what are the problems in terms of the informational architecture. That is just a really great way to spot the talent and see if they're able to work with you and to, and it's a great way. What we like about it, it mirrors the problems that they're going to solve day to day. When you're talking to folks such as software developers, many of them complain that the assessment has nothing to do with their day to day. Like they might have to go through these hoops of knowing all these different algorithms. And then at the end of the day, they would be making meaningful changes in CSS, but that is a big difference from a huge like algorithm test. And we don't want to make the same mistake when it comes to technical writers. Like give them an assessment that mirrors their day to day job. And you can take the 5 best applications and you can use Google Meet to talk to them. The reason why you would want to talk to these applicants because you know that their written communication is sufficient, but you also want to know, can they communicate via video? What is the problem? What is their solution? Because written content is only part of the equation when it comes to clarity and when it comes to really good communication. Large language models and Bard and ChatGPT. We would be remiss to pretend like large language models and AI do not exist. What we will say from our experience, it's a good idea to steer clear from these applications because they're still dealing with copyright issues. And also in your organization, if you're putting in data in a large language model, then that large language model is actually training your information. And there might be some information that you don't want it to be, you don't want Bard or ChatGPT to train on. So at this point, we suggest to just not use LLMs. Job description and managing application. Clarity, clarity, clarity. Do you notice a theme here? When you're writing a solid job description, make sure that you're clear about what is your goal and what is the end state. Once again, if you've written a proposal to Google Season of Docs, that's probably your goals are in there. So you can put that in your job description. Also, have an overview about your organization. What are you trying to do? What is the change that you're trying to make in the world? This is a great way to find if the technical writers that you're about to hire are really into the mission. Um, and job overview, you just dive into the position, be specific as possible. Once again, go over the why. Why are they doing this? Why are they showing up? What is that big goal that you're trying to accomplish? What is that pain point that you want solved? When it comes to skills and qualifications, don't make this into a wish list. Don't make this to a list. Don't make this a list like for Santa Claus. Stick to 3 to 5 skills. The reason why it's important for 3 to 5 skills because it widens the amount of candidates that you'll be able to get. And there are certain candidates that probably would not apply unless they have all of those skills that you've listed. So pick out, let's say that you need someone who knows Markdown, who knows a Git workflow. Be very clear and be to the point when it comes to skills and qualifications. And when it comes to outcomes and milestones, once again, take that big goal that you want to accomplish and break it up into chunks, milestones, and put that together with a timeline so that applicant knows where they stand and what would working day to day look like, and you would know what you're expecting from that person. Keep track of your candidates. There have been some past cohorts that have received up to 500 applicants for one spot. You can make it easier if you have a spreadsheet that keeps track of these candidates. If you look into the notes, we've actually have a spreadsheet and a template that you can use to help you keep track of this information. And we also have a Loom explaining how to use that spreadsheet. Once again, we dog food these technologies. What I will say in terms of the 500 applicants, if you want to whittle it down, it's really good to look for the applicants where they have already worked in the organization, or they have some capacity where they might have worked as an intern, they might have worked as a software developer, or they've worked in the same field. For instance, we a past cohort like R. Like, let's say you're an R, your project is R, and the person has worked with pandas or scikit-learn or TensorFlow. It might not be R, but they are familiar with data science. And a word about experience, you might have one person that has 2 years of, or like 6 months of experience. You might have a person who has 20. What we found out, when it comes to experience, just because someone has a lot of years doesn't mean they might have the qualifications. Like, I know one writer where he's only been writing for about 6 months and he's already contributed to an open source project, well, two open source projects. He has gone to all of the technical writing, Twitter Spaces, and that kind of person has more experience than someone who has been working 5 years in like one technology and might not know like the Git workflow, or might not know how to contribute to a project. So even if someone doesn't have a whole lot of years of experience, look at the work that they have already done. Conclusion: a positive hiring experience really sets the tone between a relationship of you and your technical writer. Be clear about the problems that you are trying to solve. Keep in mind, talent is everywhere. So if you have the tools, then remote can totally work for you. But I think a lot of orgs who already are working on a remote basis, uh, tools such as Slack, Discord, and Loom, they are your friend. And remember that you're part of a bigger community. We're in this together. And if you have any questions, you can always go to the Write to Docs Slack channel in Season of Docs, and we'll be there to answer questions and, just to share experiences. So that's it for the presentation. At this point, we will open it up for question and answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that insightful presentation, Portia. And I'm really happy to see there's a hive of activity in the chat. And we already have a few questions. Earlier, Dan Learns Music was asking about strategies for hiring volunteers. And he says, the entire time I have in the back of my mind that I'm not paying them what they deserve, and we both know it. I can't go into just any hiring community. Also, in the past, volunteers would just disappear. What do you suggest that people in Dan's situation, what they can do to have a better experience with volunteer writers?
I would definitely say clarity and honesty is your best friend. Like, there are people, if you can tell them, hey, I can't pay you market rate, but this is what we're going to do. There are tons of people that will actually be part of the project because they like the mission, they like what you're doing. And you can also pay in terms of teaching them different skills. So if you're with a volunteer, then you should spend extra time helping them with different skills, such as, let's say they don't know React or let's say they really don't know Git, or let's say they're trying to work on a portfolio. Like if I had a volunteer, I would not only help them and give them more mentoring on things that are part of the job, but I would also give them help. I also mentor them on their personal projects, and I would be okay and encourage them when they move on. Because when you have volunteers, they might not stay with you forever, but the fact that you are that bridge to that dream job really means a lot. And what was the second part of that question?
Um, yeah, he said we both know I can't just go into any hiring community. And also in the past, volunteers will just disappear.
When volun you can't 100% you can't 100% prevent volunteers from disappearing, but you could ask them like what is I have a question. Did they actually give reasons why they're disappearing?
Um, we'll see. Perhaps he's typing in the chat. I hope he is.
What I will say is having an honest conversation about the kind of commitment that you would need is really important. And quite frankly, making it worthwhile, like helping them, mentoring, giving them the skills that they need to be successful in your job and beyond, gives them an incentive to stick around.
Mhm.
And this is also a great case for internal documentation. We talk a lot about outward facing documentation, but even if that volunteer did not have a chance to finish, then if you write down the processes of what you expect from the technical writer and how to move forward, then you can onboard another volunteer. And finally, this is what I've actually done in the past: have more than one volunteer around. So I've had situations where I would have someone who was a secondary volunteer. So they were an unofficial volunteer, meaning if there were things that the volunteer and I could not accomplish, I would have someone else help us. Like, for instance, let's say blogging. If you have someone just working on a blog and you have one volunteer disappear, then you have already partially trained that other person to step into the volunteer's position. So having working with more than one volunteer, more than one person, I think is a way to go. And also making it worthwhile and always understanding what is the volunteer getting out of this experience is pivotal.
All right. So yeah, Dan did respond that in his case, they just said they got busy.
Yeah, that's why it's important I mean, this is not something that will prevent business or emergencies from happening, but being clear about the time commitment is important, but that's the best that you can do. Is just be clear and have that other volunteer around and train someone else.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much for that, Dan. I hope your question has been answered thoroughly. The next question comes from Paidamoyo Janet, and she said, I would love to know how to find a mentor for technical writing. I have some experience from other industries, but not sure how to jump into this area in tech.
I have a shameless plug. If you want to get into technical writing, Document Right actually has Twitter spaces that we do every Friday where we talk about technical writing. You can join that. I won't stop there. In terms of other pieces of advice, you can go into an open source project on GitHub and you can make some suggestions on how to improve the documentation. And if they say, hey, or if they say yes, then you can actually improve the documentation yourself. There are tons of open source projects out there. There's one I believe called Mark Prompt, which is, if I'm not mistaken, Charles, did I get the name correct? Mark Prompt.
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, they are, and they're AI for. technical writing like knowledge centers. So it's like an open source. It's a way that you can use Chat GPT in um, like a CMS for people who want to know about your project. So you could use like a Docusaurus, and so Docusaurus is a JavaScript CMS for technical writing, and you can use Mark Prompt. Mark Prompt is great, but they definitely need someone to help them with their documentation. And it's a great way for you to learn about the project. It's a great way for you to give value right away. It's intimidating, but that's the best way to find a mentor. When you're looking for a mentor, try to figure out what kind of skills that you have and what you can bring to the table to help them out.
Okay, sounds good. We have, I think this is a specific question regarding the Twitter Spaces that you host, Portia. Technical Disasters says, do you have plans to provide sessions outside of Twitter? And follows on with, I don't use Twitter and I don't plan to.
um, Not at the moment, but we could have live YouTube spaces where we can just talk about technical writing and help people along with open source projects. I'd be more than happy to do that every week.
All right, sounds good.
You don't want to be on Twitter? I totally understand.
Yeah, sometimes the social media can be quite distracting at times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay, this is a question that I got from my inbox earlier. This is with regards to receiving like a large volume of applications.
Mhm.
We advertised for a technical writer vacancy recently and got over 100 applications. What can we do to manage such a large volume of applications without excluding good candidates?
Be clear on what a good candidate looks like. What kind of skills, what kind of demeanor would that ideal candidate have? And then take it from there. Also, look for people who know or who are somewhat familiar with the domain. Like using the R example, if someone never programmed in R, but they know something about data science, or if they, and when I say know something about data science, if they have a GitHub repo with a bunch of like Jupyter notebooks that and they're not working with an organization, I mean, that's great. And I'd say they are part of the community. So be clear about the skills that you're looking for. Be clear that about the mission. And what I will say from personal experience, many of the applications you get, they're applying to other places, which is fine, but the applications tend to be generic. If you're looking at a generic application, then you could safely put it aside and look for an application where the person has tailored it to your organization, the mission, and the mission.
All right. Okay. Sounds great. I think that's some really good and actionable advice that can be immediately put to great use. Um, this we don't have any more questions in the pipeline. I'd like to encourage people. This is your chance. Ask away anything you're wondering about documentation, the documentation writing process, etc. I have a
Can I add
question.
to a suggestion?
Yeah,
So
sure.
there
Go
was a
ahead.
person who did ask about how to get into how to find a mentor. I would
Yep.
also like to shout out right the docs Slack channel. So if you know someone, you can go to the Slack channel, and if you have questions, if someone's working on a project, then that's also a great way to look for a mentor. So it's right the docs Slack channel.
All right. All right. Okay. So on the question of the candidates, Christine Belzy said.
Mhm.
She was saying, "Sorry, I got concerned given the biases applicants face, especially those from marginalized groups." I think this is with regards to filtering out candidates when you have such a large volume of applicants. How does that equity part play in?
I am slightly confused because how many applications actually have a picture on it? Not including Germany, by the way, because in Germany that's actually standard practice.
Right. Okay. Um,
Christine, can you give more context, please?
yeah. Oh, okay. I think she's referring to when we said looks like someone who looks like a great candidate. I think yeah,
Oh,
we were
I don't
talking
mean
about skill.
physically.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking
Yeah.
about skill.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's great. So again, on this issue, Dan weighed in by saying, I got called out for judging people's English skills when they reached out to me for English writing role. Thoughts?
Um, this is where having a style guide really helps because even someone who is a native English speaker, if you clearly have in a style guide the type of text that you're looking for, then that really solves that problem. Google has a great technical style guide, so does Microsoft, and DigitalOcean does too. So in order to cut down on that bias, because there are native Canadians, there are not natives, I'm sorry, there are Canadians who are engineers, but they might not write in the way that you want them to, even though they're native English speakers. So just having a style guide makes sure that everyone is on the same page.
Okay, sounds good. Could you give a bit more detail about what a style guide is for the benefit of those who may not be familiar with the term?
Sure, sure. That's a good question. So a style guide for those of you who are developers, if you're programming in like Python or in JavaScript, you're probably using something called a linter. And a linter is a list, an automated list of best practices of how you write your code. Because even if you write your, let's say semicolons, so you might put in semicolons in JavaScript and someone might not like it. If you actually have a linter, then that's a standardized rule where you don't have to spend every PR. I've actually lived this reality, by the way, where you're arguing about semicolons. And the same thing is true for a style guide. Like you don't have to argue about when are you using adverbs. You don't have to argue, are we going to end our sentences with prepositions? Those rules are already there. Um, the style guides that I was talking about, they are real guides that you actually look at. You can also automate your style guides by using Veil and GitHub Actions. If you're curious about that, we actually created a video several months ago about how to automate your style guide so it acts as a linter.
Okay, sounds good. So basically, it's a tool you use to enforce some kind of consistency in your writing, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yep. I hope that was helpful to you, Dan. Sarah says, do you have any suggestions for mentoring at scale? We have a large community at Astro, but the experience levels availability vary wildly.
I love Astro. Shout out to Astro. If you're interested in learning more about technical writing, then you should look at Astro. I believe, and please tell me if I'm wrong, I believe that every Thursday they go through their documentation. You can ask questions and you can contribute. I'm only adding to Astro's problem, so I'm sorry. So I will follow it up with a solution. Like you have a problem, you have a lot of people, more people, go to Astro. I have a suggestion. Look for volunteers that have already been there for a while. It's an amazing setup where if you have, let's say, let's put out some numbers, 100 volunteers and you're overwhelmed, look for those 5 volunteers that are already doing the work in terms of going on. Discord, going on Twitter, telling people about the Astro Project, who are helping people with questions, issues, and commits. So look for those very active volunteers, put in a little time to train them, and have those volunteers deal with the other volunteers. It's really rewarding because it's a great way to help people at scale, and it's a great way for volunteers to level up. And I have done this before, and it's great.
Okay, sounds good. I think that's also, yep, something that you can implement immediately. Basically, delegate, find super volunteers, and then have them train sort of the next generation of volunteers that you have. Um, Sounds good. I think um, that's sort of what happens on the coding side in terms of the
Hmm.
contributions to open source. So, uh, pretty much no reason why the documentation side can't adopt the same strategies. Um, so yeah, really good questions, guys.
Yeah,
Please keep
thank
them
you.
going. We still have another quarter hour, and
We
yep.
Yeah, but in terms of the volunteers, we call them the volunteers that are helping out. I can't tell you how much they love it. And it makes the project more mature because it forces you to write internal documentation of how do you level up a volunteer? How can you make it so that they're helping people in a meaningful way? It makes you more organized. It makes the volunteer, it gives them more responsibilities, and those responsibilities, they actually go beyond your project. Those responsibilities, they're able to put that on their resume. They're able to level up on in professionally in their jobs. So taking those volunteers and having them help with the other volunteers, I think is a really good solution.
Okay, sounds good. Um, Perhaps can we talk a little bit more about internal documentation, um, like why it's important, and as well maybe some differences in approach when you're trying to improve your internal documentation and when you're trying to improve your external documentation.
Sure. Internal documentation, I think it's in the heart of equity issues. In some companies, you have a person who's been there maybe 5 or 10 years, who they have all the knowledge. They have all the knowledge because they've been there, they've done a lot of projects. And the problem is it's really hard for other people to partake. It's really hard. Let's say that one person is gone, and sometimes projects screech to a they stop. And making sure that everyone has equal access to information really comes down to having robust internal documentation. It's great for onboarding as well. You know how great or how lacking your internal documentation is when you hire someone new and you're not able to point them to the documentation. And when you do point them to the documentation, the information is outdated, the information is missing, and there are many folks, rightfully so, that judge a company based on their onboarding experience. So being able to have a smooth onboarding experience, internal documentation is great. Breaking down those knowledge silos. It also helps you when you're writing external documentation, because I think you really see very quickly what is sustainable and what is not. And you're able to create systems internally that you can use externally. One of the systems I would mention is automating your style guide, like Veil, or having one company that we worked with. This was brilliant. They had a person who was in charge of documentation every other week. So if there's a documentation question, if they had to update documentation, then that one person was responsible. And then the next 2 weeks, it would be someone else. And it's all about being intentional.
Okay, sounds good. Um,
If there aren't any more questions, we can stop here. But if you do have questions, we're more than happy to help you. And we're taking the advice that we're giving you is coming from the Google season of Docs case studies. So if you want to know more about what does it mean to work with a technical writer on a real project, then Google season of Docs case studies, they have a case study for 2022 and 2021. It's full of information. I look at it all the time. And we're also taking information, we're also giving advice based on our document rights experiences.
okay, sounds good. Um, there doesn't seem to be more questions coming from the chat. Uh,
Okay.
I do still have a couple, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Charles is not going to let me off the hook that easy.
There's a lot of different people of like varying skill levels participating in the program. Um,
Mhm.
so I'd like to ask two questions. One from the perspective of someone who with less experience, maybe just starting out in the field, and then another from the other end of the spectrum, where someone has loads of experience. Um, what's the top three skills that a new technical writer should learn?
Are you rocking out already?
Sorry.
Are you rocking out already? Oh, we just
Uh,
see.
uh,
That
yeah.
was actually kind of fun. Um, if you're the person with less experience, I've definitely been in a situation. Sometimes your mentor has not broken the projects in small enough chunks. So having that first conversation where you're very clear about the expectations of, well, what does the first 15 days look like? Like what does the first 15 days look like? What does the first 30 days look like? What does the first like 90 days look like? I think is really important because unfortunately there are because many folks are busy, and when they do hire a tech, the reality is when they hire a technical writer, they probably should have already hired three. And so just helping that person chunk the information or chunk the goals in a way where there's more clarity is important if you're a less experienced person. Also being curious, going to places like Write the Docs Slack channel, learning more, going to document write videos and just leveling up or taking a peek at Astro Docs, sending more people to Astro. And being part of more projects like Wagtail, which is a Django CMS. They're pretty cool. That'll be a great way for you to gain skills. If you are the person who is hiring or if you're the mentor, be be intentional, do the chunking, and you should schedule more time than you think you would need. So if you think you would need to meet with that person once a week, make it twice a week. If you think you need a half an hour, pad it 1 hour so there's no surprises because you're probably going to spend more time training than you expect. And so it's really good to just have your door open for questions and to be supportive and also have a list of resources for that new person. If that person wants to learn more about Git, have those resources of where they can learn more about Git. If they're more curious about using like MDX or Docusaurus, have those resources available. And heck, have a resource page for them. It's good for the technical writer that you're working with. And it's also good for future technical writers. Make it even better for the less experienced person. Have them add resources too. So they're helping the next generation. And you're building good practices and you're also building that internal documentation.
Okay, awesome. There aren't any more questions in the chat, so I think we can wrap it up there. But before we head out, you mentioned that viewers can get more information um, from the case studies of Google Season of Docs the past years. Is there anywhere else that you'd recommend where someone interested in learning more about technical writing, or maybe people on the hiring side, where they can learn more?
Oh, yes, I forgot a great blog that I need to shout out. There's a blog called I'd Rather Be Writing. It's amazing. We'll have to put it in the notes later on. I'd Rather Be Writing is all about technical writing with an emphasis on creating robust API documentation. Going to the Write the Docs Slack channel, it's pretty informative. You can always look at our YouTube videos to learn more. Going into the Google Season of Docs information, like they have a GitHub repo with some information, and they also have a website that has a wealth of information. So going to those resources, I would say, is a really good and strong start.
All right. Thank you very much, Portia, for your insights. Very invaluable.
Thank you,
And thank
Charles,
and thank
for
you
the
very much.
information.
Yep. And thank you very much to our audience. I
Mhm.
really like how lively everyone was in the chat, helping each other out, asking lots of questions. It's been great, and I'm sure that the program is going to be a great experience for everyone. Also, a special thank you to um, Google Season of Docs for sponsoring this and
Yes.
for just running a great program. I think this is really good and will further the cause of so many awesome open source contributors. And I see in the audience we have our friend from Google, Erin. Hi, Erin. How you doing?
Oh, hi, Erin.
Yep. And that's it. That's all from me. Thank you guys very much.